Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Alphasigma podcast. If you guys don't know, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Ella.
Today, we're gonna do an exciting Sigma activity, which is reading horror stories. So, last week, we wrote horror stories in Miss Fitt's class, or in like any other English class you take, but yeah, we're gonna take a look at some of those stories, specifically one story because we don't have any other story to review. So we're just gonna read through them, we're gonna see how good they are and see how messed up they are, so...
Make sure you stay tuned and keep watching to the end of today's episode. It's Sigma story time. Let's go.
Heck yeah. Ella's pulling up the stories, so get ready for some high quality Sigma story time. We are really good at audiobooks. If you didn't know, we are professional audiobook readers, so let's get started. The title is I Hate Plums, and the author is Natalia Rodriguez. She is a really great author. She wrote this for her freaky story assignment, and we are gonna begin reading it.
Paragraph 1, page 1. I hate plums. I am Myra Treasure, and on my way up to school, I spotted my neighbor, Joseph Page's plum tree. I never asked for one of his plums, primarily because he smelled funky, like a skunk. He was always inside his house, and the only time he came outside, he was using liquid fertilizer on his plum tree. That morning, his car wasn't inside, thus I reckoned he wasn't home. That day, I woke up hungry thanks to me brushing off grocery shopping the weekend before. I swiftly ran up to Joseph's plum tree and borrowed 4 of his plums for myself to enjoy. I bit into one of the plums and shut my eyes in disgust at their bitter taste. I continued eating the plum though, simply because I had nothing else to munch on.
Yeah, so far Joseph is a freak. He smells really bad. Hopefully he doesn't axe bomb. Hopefully he doesn't axe bomb Mira Treasure. But anyway, I'll start reading the second paragraph. I arrived at school at 7:40 and still craved food. I ate the other plum and had the same reaction as the first one. The plums tasted exactly how Mr. Joseph smelled. By now I had 2 plums before first period even started. I walked into class woozy and looked at my AP Lang teacher, Miss Libby, as she ties up her beautiful curly hair into some type of braid. Her hair wasn't hair. It was thousands of black ants feeding onto her skull. My heart stopped.
Miss Libby, why are you bald? Did you notice the thousands of ants eating your scalp? I hysterically screamed.
I said calmly. Miss Treasure! What ants? Get them off my head immediately! Miss Libby cries out loud and starts vigorously and forcefully slashing her head with a pencil until her head becomes bathed in blood.
I, of course, helped Miss Libby by ripping the ants off her head. Her scalp was bloody and she was yelling for help, and she had a bunch of ant turds on her head. I was grossed out, but all of that happened in the span of a second because in the other second, I had her ants all over my hands. The ants were now crawling on me, and my skin jumped from the excruciating pain of them biting me. And by now, I'm kicking and screaming. Miss Libby launches on top of me as I hyperventilate to the commotion going around us.
Dude, Miss Libby is such a freak. Oh my god. Anyway, why'd you rip the hair directly out my scalp? What's your problem? Miss Libby puts out calmly. I peeped from the corner of my eye to my first period classmates, hollering for the campus sheriff, Judd. I always found Judd useless and unreliable because I saw him in the first month of school gawking at the wall the whole lunch period. But that day, for some reason, he stepped up.
Officer! Officer! An unknown student yells.
Sheriff Judd, come here. There's a student-teacher fight going on. I think it's a Mira Treasure versus Miss Libby.
Another unknown voice pleads.
I snap back to see Miss Libby holding me down while yelling nonsense. I noticed that her once before paled face turned into this red color. A little too red. Like meat? This is when I noticed for real what was up with Miss Libby. Her face was bright red. Like meat because it was! I scream again after seeing her once pale face be twisted flesh. I describe her as a burnt victim.
I hear more than one pair of boots running towards me, where me and Miss Libby were, but I wasn't concerned about the officers coming over anymore. I was more focused on Miss Libby's disgusting face. As I continued to sweat and sob while struggling to get her off me, she decided to barf on my face and chest. Oatmeal and ants! I wouldn't even wish this on a demon for revenge. She still has a grip on my arms and doesn't let go even after she puked all over me. But the officers finally separated us from each other.
I think Miss Libby needs to go to prison. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, Sigma opinion, I feel like Miss Libby should be imprisoned and waterboarded.
Yeah, I love waterboarding. Hurry, y'all! Separate these two ladies and take Miss Libby to the other room while I take this one in another room. Sheriff Judd screams to the other officers while being next to my ear.
I bite Judd's arm as he takes me into the other room and manages to knock me out in one punch. I soon realized why he knocked me out using so much force. I woke up in the hospital to the sight of my mother and father looking down at me. They looked so tired of me. I had a headache from the knockout and I was overstimulated on everything going around me and what happened to Miss Libby's first period. I started to sob from all the stress, but now with my mother, who's crying after I did. That sentence made so much sense. She's such a great author.
We love Natalia Rodriguez and her writing. She's just so talented, but that's for later.
Yeah, I'm so inspired by Natalia's writing that it cured my cancer.
Yeah, guys, we don't have cancer anymore.
Yeah, my erectile dysfunction solved itself, so I'm like really glad I read this story. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. Myra, my baby, what did you do now? What's wrong with you?
How do I even reply to that?
You have no excuse for ripping out your teacher's hair like that, young lady. We never raised you to be hostile towards others, especially an adult. My dad cuts me off before I get to say anything.
Oh, honey, who taught you this behavior?
Who and what influenced you to rip out a teacher's hair and later attack a sheriff? My mother jumps into the conversation, but manages to look at the floor instead of me. She was too disappointed to even look at me now.
You're facing about 15 years in jail with no possibility of parole, my dad says finally, allowing one tear to glide down his face.
But father, she launched at me first.
She asked me if I could take the ants she had on her hair. Sorry, I burped. I start to whine.
What ants, Myra? There was nothing on her. My mother sobs at me, frustrated again.
The ones in her head, Mom. She had thousands of them eating her scalp, I swear.
I retort in an annoyed tone.
Myra, what in the world are you blabbering about? She had no ant infestation on her scalp. In fact, her hair was completely untouched until you decide to rip it out.
She sure did, Father. Father, let me show you right now. I say, as I remember how the ants were also on me after I took them out of her head.
I unrolled my bandages to prove the ants were on me too, but as I get closer and closer to revealing my arms, I see nothing but bruises and slashes of a pencil. Miss Libby tore me up with pencils. My question wasn't why she would even do such a thing, but where did my ant marks go? I know they bit me, I could feel it.
I look up now in embarrassment from looking like a liar, trying to think of how I could explain this to my parents about the supposed ant marks disappearing from my arms. They still looked annoyed and confused. I knew I messed up now.
Liar.
We are gonna have a long week. Wrap the bandages back up, Mira.
You look stupid, my father says resentfully.
Don't worry, Myra. We'll give you the greatest lawyer in Texas if possible.
My mother says, trying to reassure me about the whole situation. Alright, this is a giant paragraph. We'll just like split it apart. So you start it first, Ella.
Okay. Mother was right about the best lawyer in Texas. He managed to lower my sentence to 6 years in prison and 3 years of probation. Father made me take a bunch of tests in between the court days, and they took forever to complete. I don't know if they were testing me or if I was lying about something. But now that I'm older, my mom told me it was tests for random mental illnesses. Father drove me everywhere to find doctors to test me for schizophrenia, BPD, PTSD, and much more, to maybe pull the insanity card in court. They all came back negative, no matter how much my dad wanted to believe I was schizophrenic. The next week, I told my lawyer I swore she had black ants on her hair, but she didn't have any ant marks either. So I stopped mentioning ants since then towards my family. In court, it was revealed that Miss Libby got on top of me because she was frightened of what else I might have done. Dramatic, I would point out, but to my surprise, she announced to the court that she had two motives, other than the fact that she was pregnant with her second child. Hence why she was puking on me during the fight. The next few months were rough on me and my family. I was all over the news and had to go to online school since I got suspended. You got it.
After the case was settled, I went to jail. I got death threats while Miss Libby donated from all over the world about $2 million. Well, I got nothing but hate mail in the jail. I had nothing better to do but read them in my spare time. I told my lawyer about the ant herd, and he just told me I confused it with dandruff, so I had nothing to prove about the ants. Life was hell. Random mothers beating me up for justice for Libby. By the second year, I managed to block all the harassment out of my head and deal with getting jumped. The next few years, it calmed down way more, which was good for me. Hate mail stopped arriving, so I finally got a hobby, which was writing. I began to write, and I found writing an escape for me because paper didn't interrupt me like my parents or lawyers, nor did it randomly switch up. It stayed the same unless I erased a line or two. Life was getting better, and I was planning to publish an autobiography about myself and what happened that year. On the last day, I published it and left to go eat with my parents. It was extremely awkward, but it felt nice eating mom's homemade food. My parents made a small house for me to live in next to them since they believed I'd struggle to make money with my status.
On the first night of sleeping there, I heard a knob turn, and I jumped at sight of Sheriff Judd. He explained how the baby died and how he was the father even though Miss Libby was married to another man. Officer Judd loved Miss Libby so much to the point that he promised her he'd kill me the moment I was alone.
And that's the end of I Hate Plums. So, what do you think of the story?
That is probably the best story I've ever read. Like, there's literature and then there's Shakespeare type literature. Like, so I think, like, you know, this is like, she could compete with Shakespeare and getting super popular like that, you know?
Yeah, I think she would like definitely win a boxing match between her and William Shakespeare. Like, she is a lyrical genius and she has a great mastery of words and grammar. Also, she has a lot of facts and logic in her story. And I liked how Mira Treasure rips that pregnant lady's scalp off for like no reason. Because apparently she's not schizophrenic, so that's what I thought she was doing. I thought it was just like tweaking out, but I guess not. So anyway, the actual ending was way different. You may have thought that was a cliffhanger, but there was actually a much more to that freaky ending.
To explain Myra's, you know, how she was off at the beginning, Mr. Joseph Page, the plum tree guy, he laces his plums. So he puts cocaine in them and hallucinogens, which is why she saw ants in her teacher's hair. So yeah, like imagine you just eat a plum and then you start seeing ants everywhere. Like, I think that how she acted was totally justified, and I don't know how the doctors didn't find out that she was drugged.
Yeah, so the plum was laced, basically, guys. So yeah, that was a wacky, freaky story for a Halloween-ish special for our first episode, and it's actually kind of fun that we record this on Halloween. So if you're watching this right now, have a great Halloween, or if you're watching this later, then have a good after Halloween. Anyway, next episode we're going to do something a little less gimmicky. We're probably going to talk about microplastics and how to use a microwave and that sort of stuff, so stay tuned for that.
Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next month.
Alphasigma.
If you've made it to the end, I hope you've enjoyed this month's episode of the Alphasigma podcast. And again, we want to thank you guys for all of the support.
If it were for you, we would have quit this podcast to make NFT scams.
Also, please write a review. It really helps us improve our podcast. And we'll see you around next month with a new episode.
Alphasigma.